And thank you all for joining us today. I'm Mo Mia, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. We're excited to share how HP and STN are unlocking new possibilities for AI health startups with the new Digital Health Foundry program. And we'll move on to the agenda slide here. Today, we are joined by Derek Howard, HP Digital Health Solutions Lead, Sabur Mia, the CEO and founder of STN, and Susan Sly, CEO and founder of the POS Technologies. Let's take a look at the agenda. We'll first discuss AI in healthcare and life science trends and the challenges for early-stage health tech companies. Discuss the new program and how STN brings value, and then Susan will share her experiences and how the POS is leveraging AI, followed by Q&A at the very end. All right, next slide. So AI in healthcare is a very hot topic, right, Derek? Can you get us started on what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mo. Appreciate it. There's some really great reports out there right now. If you look, Bessemer Ventures, McKinsey, all highlighting that AI in healthcare really is an overnight success that's been 80 years in the making. And some of the major drivers in AI for healthcare in terms of an opportunity is that healthcare produces 30% of the world's data, and now it's all digitized. And so healthcare AI research is now translating into products and services. So as you can see here from the data, right, the market is growing very rapidly, and there's a huge boost in investment levels. In one recent survey, I also heard that 70% of payers and providers are reporting pursuing implementations of generative AI technologies. It's kind of hard to read, but you can see the McKinsey report here. The top circle there is healthcare, which is seeing a super high degree of generative AI spending. So Susan, welcome you and support a comment too in terms of kind of some of the things you guys are seeing. But we obviously see that this is really an exploding area in the market.
Well, thanks, Derek. And from these, when we start to look and drill down into the data that we're seeing in terms of adoption, and specifically with generative AI, and know that this is 70 years in the making. The first early models came, about 70 years ago in the 50s at Stanford. So for anyone watching and thinking this AI phenomenon is something new, it was a long time building the foundation that we see now. We are seeing many, many hospital organizations using the generative AI models. We're seeing agentic AI on the rise to solve for very specific problems. And I think we are at an inflection point, because even if we look at the data that came out today from OpenAI, where since Q4 they've doubled their paid subscribers, people are getting much more comfortable with AI. They're looking for precision solutions. And I think for this team with HP and STN and ourselves, we're just poised for a fantastic trajectory to serve millions and millions of people together.
And I'll contribute a little bit more from the perspective of resources in the healthcare side of the house. My wife is a ICU nurse and has spent 19 years being an ICU nurse. And the way I met her was she was a travel nurse because Stanford could not fill the positions from resources that are in California. So nursing, and that has actually just continue to become even more sparse, specifically after COVID, because everybody's burned out. A lot of the healthcare providers are burnt out, and where AI is going to be able to help is augment some of those tasks that nursing. I can talk about nursing because I hear it from her every day. Aren't going to be automated, where they don't have to continuously worry about the paperwork that is involved in order to make sure that your healthcare is taken care of, and they can focus on actually making your loved ones feel better.
Awesome, great stuff. But AI in healthcare and life science startups and early stage companies, they're facing a lot of challenges. All right, Susan, you recently shared that early stage companies need to face the facts.
Yeah, absolutely, Mo. And especially, I just right before this, and I want to acknowledge everyone who's here and watching. I was catching up with a friend of mine who's got an AI startup focused actually on the pet space. And we were talking about, as female founders, especially. So to go through this, I want to provide some statistics. So a couple of years ago, the stat was less than 2.5% of female-led pitches to VCs got funded. That number has actually gone down. So we're now south of 2.3%. And then if you take into account founders who are maybe brown or black, I mean, that number is even less. So and we have friends as well who are trying to make headroads in terms of funding in life sciences, and they are used to getting grant money. And there's a lot of uncertainty. So with regard to funding, Mo, the founders need to be very scrappy and resilient. For our startup, we had 13 amazing women write checks. I turned people away. That was one of the strategies. All of our advisors have written checks into the company. And I can tell you that I looked at funding, even coming out of my previous startup where I executed with our team several funding rounds. I looked at it very differently. Money's expensive right now. I mean, we saw the Fed is very still being very hawkish. Money's not going to be cheap in the immediate couple months. I don't foresee that. And so you've got to be scrappy. And then taking a look at the architecture, which I'm going to have Sabur weigh in on, and then customer acquisition. So what is your line of sight, especially if you intend to go into enterprise? How are you going to get those relationships? And then what are your tactics? Are you going to be able to pivot? Competitors are always going to be on your heels. And then when you're looking at scale, whatever it is your idea is and that concept, can you scale it all the way to an exit so that your investors are going to get that ROI? And full disclosure, I have 7 startups in my investment portfolio, and that's one of the things I always ask them: what's your exit strategy? How are you going to scale? Is your technology going to be able to handle the increased demands of infrastructure as you have more customers? So yeah, startups need to face the facts, Mo. And I'd love to hear Sabur talk about, especially around all of these pieces, but as a great partner to us, I mean, really helping with the architecture and customer acquisitions, tactics, and scale.
Absolutely. Actually, Susan, I actually have a question for you. Since you're in the midst of this, I don't want to use the word difficult. How expensive has it been to be able to find the right resources to help you with the technical stack of being able to build the base infrastructure, specifically in the public cloud space?
Oh, Sabur, I love this question. So one of the things I was asked this question. I was being interviewed on this big podcast, and someone said, you in my previous startup, which we were partners with HP as well in the computer vision space in retail, I had the privilege of getting to learn so much. And it's like, Sabur, there's this checklist of things you just need to do when you're starting an AI startup. And I just said, going into this startup, I know there's a checklist. It doesn't mean all the items on that checklist are fun, but I know I have to do them as they can go faster. But from the architecture standpoint and the infrastructure standpoint, one of the things I did differently, as you know, this time was when it was announced publicly that I was going to start the pause. HPE was the first company to reach out to me. And before we even fully had this concept of what our prototype would be, we started with our infrastructure, because the last thing I wanted to worry about was the cost of standing up this product. So we were able to not spend money on tech infrastructure, and all we had to do was spend the engineering dollars, which was fantastic. And that's one of the big pieces of advice that I give to startups is, a lot of times you have some very well-meaning folks and they have an idea, especially in healthcare, and they want to do something, and it's very noble and beautiful. However, they don't understand what those costs are going to be, especially as they're aggregating huge amounts of data or they're training models. So starting with the architecture and that ability to not have to even think about it, it's not one of the things that keeps me up at night. So I'm not going to tie a dollar, but I will tell you that based on the average of what it costs to stand up a digital health startup in the AI space, we spend about 1/3 of what anyone else would spend.
Yeah.
Susan?
I'll tell you
Yeah.
dollars over drinks. That's what I'll do.
There you go.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And actually, I thought about this, and I had come up with a couple of questions, relative to each of these areas too. So, relative to funding, a question that early stage folks can ask themselves is how can you effectively demonstrate ROI to investors in a way that differentiates your AI healthcare solution from competitors, right? And as you look at the architecture, how do you design a scalable and compliant IT infrastructure that balances the needs for AI processing with stringent healthcare data privacy regulations like HIPAA and GDPR? On the customer acquisition side, what strategies can you use to build trust and credibility with healthcare providers and institutions that are typically risk averse when adopting new AI technologies, right? And then from a tactical standpoint, like what are the key partnerships that you can use to accelerate adoption and validation of your solution, and how do you secure those? And then finally, on the scaling of the business, how do you expand into new healthcare markets or specialties while maintaining regulatory compliance, data security, and then a high degree of AI model accuracy at scale? So these are the things that I was thinking of relative when I saw the facing the facts in my head. So
Yeah, and I think each one of those could be, Derek, a webinar in and of itself. From
true.
the funding piece, I do want to say there's an amazing movie. One of my friends was one of the producers on it, called Show Her the Money. And from the vantage point of women-led startups, the big trend we're seeing is women supporting women, but women will write checks as angel investors, but they're smaller check sizes. So again, when I say you have to get scrappy, you have to think differently. It's really about looking at it and saying, if you're going to live, breathe, die by the sword, and this is going to be the thing you're going to do 16, 18, sometimes 20 hours a day, that you have to know how to sell. And funding is going to come down to your value proposition is not just you have a great product, who on your team can actually sell. In my former company, myself and four co-founders, we built a very impressive sales pipeline. And that was part of the last time we raised, was showing potential investors what that sales pipeline was. And it wasn't just, oh, we think we might know someone who knows someone at XYZ company. We had weighted those averages. We had the names, the contacts, the dates we met. Were we under NDA? And so you want to start to aggregate all of those things as you go into different funding rounds. They're going to look at your team and say, who can sell? That's the bottom line. I won't invest in a company that has a bunch of engineers, but no one can sell a thing. I come out of sales. I helped one company in the CPG wellness space do $2 billion in sales. In my last company, I did significant sales. So do you have someone who can sell? Because if you don't, you're not investable. And then, scale everything else, Derek, just becomes a moot point, candidly.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and frankly, all of these challenges are why HP decided to create the Digital Health Foundry program in partnership with SDN, right? To accelerate the startup's journey from idea to impact, by connecting startups with innovative technology, the resources, the guidance, the partnerships to bring their ideas to market sooner. So we're super excited about this. And really, we wanted to address these challenges, and really our mission is around providing the technology enablement, the community engagement, and the partnership for success for healthcare and life science technology startups to expand their positive impact, right, and tackle today's most difficult healthcare challenges. So I wanted to take a few minutes just to dive deeper into the program benefits. We've got them here in terms of technology enablement, community engagement, and partnership for success. We'll take a few minutes to dive into this. And HPE has great technology and also great partners, and we wanted to partner with SDN because of their unique capabilities. And so they're kind of foundational to the technology enablement piece. So I wanted to turn it over to Sabor to share a little bit more about SDN and how we're partnering.
Yeah, and what's been interesting before I begin on what we've actually built is just springboarding off of what Susan was talking about, is the ability to be able to secure funding and how to actually go ahead and distribute that funding. That is the key here. Can you actually go ahead and the pre-seed funding that you might have raised of a couple of $1 million, do you want to spend most of that to developing your product, or do you want to be able to be focused on the infrastructure and giving a whole bunch of money to whoever your cloud provider is, right? And that is kind of the decision that as a business owner you have to make. This is something that we at STN had to make a decision 6, 7 months ago, 6, 7 years ago. When we started, when we didn't have any funding, we were bootstrapping and trying to figure out how can we deliver our product to our clients without having to spend a whole bunch of capital expense upfront to build the infrastructure. Or should we just take out our credit card and swipe and get some services on AWS, right? So those are the decisions that we had to make. And I'll cover some of those examples. But when HPE and Derek specifically came up to us and said, hey, we can actually do some good together to be able to provide an incubation space for customers like Susan to get them started without having to spend a whole bunch of monies towards hiring a bunch of resources that understand how data centers work, how data lakes work, and just be able to provide them a private cloud services. And that is essentially what we did, is to work with HPE, come up with a HIPAA compliant cloud service offering, which we'll cover a little bit more in detail from a technical perspective, and be able to get folks like Susan and other customers up and running immediately, right? So they can focus on what's more important, which is the revenue generation portion. And I'm sure Susan has gone through enough VC conversations to understand what they ask for and what you need to be able to deliver, and how does an owner bridge the gap. And that's essentially what Digital Health Foundry provides for everybody that's on the call today.
Awesome.
You want to go to the next slide?
Yeah. Sorry about that. There you go.
Yeah. And I'm going to have you bounce back in a second here as well.
Okay.
So STN's developed a private cloud service offering specifically focused on providing the building blocks in order for developers to be able to go ahead and start developing immediately their product line. So if you're all familiar with CI/CD, CI/CD is continuous development of your product and be able to test it and be able to actually release as fast as possible, right? So that can automatically, your entire CI/CD pipeline can tie in directly to STN's private cloud, which is HIPAA compliant. And that is key here, is because HIPAA, the aspect of getting a product out into the market is a lot of times undercut by the security requirements that are required to make sure that it is actually not going to have gaping holes. And essentially what we've provided is the baseline infrastructure is all ready to protect your environment, right? So now your code can actually also be tested against a whole bunch of different security holes that might exist. The ability to be able to deploy automatically a large data lake where data has to actually sit before it actually gets processed is not something that it's just trivial at this point in time. It is an API, you start writing towards it. You code your application to write against it. And that is essentially what you're looking at here, is that we have physical data center space across the US in order for us to be able to provide you the compute that is required, a container environment if that's the direction you want to go towards, the automatic firewalling, the routing, all of that is all handled by STN and our managed services. So now whenever you're ready, all you're doing is testing your code, tying it into your pipeline, and you're up and running. Now, can we go to the next slide? That's the base infrastructure.
Yeah. Here you go.
Now, this is a fun slide. One of the key things here is integration of AI into your stack. And I'll walk through a few traditional models that we've been seeing, Derek, for the last 12 months now, 13 months. The entire industry has kind of moved towards it at this point in time, and which is, let's build a cluster, let's get a model, let's fine tune it, let's inject a whole bunch of our data into it, and let's see what it comes out with and see if we can create a AI ready application. Well, in order to be able to do all of that stuff, you have to do quite a few things. The first thing that you have to do is find allocation on the GPUs that you need. right? So not every GPU is made the same. There are differences between what an L40 does versus an H200 does, and you have to know what you're getting. Second, the demand for getting the right GPUs for the workloads that you need, and specifically for a early stage startup, is hard to get because almost everybody, all the large players, are gobbling up whatever assets they are able to get their hands on. So being able to have the differentiating factor, which is what HPE has really provided here, is accessibility to GPUs, newer technologies, without spending a whole bunch of money. And keep in mind, these clusters are not cheap. These clusters cost a lot of money. And when you can't get it from a public cloud, you have to build it. And when you build it, it costs a lot of money. Hence, what we've built is the ability to tie in accessibility for short-term, long-term inference workloads, or just training workloads, because you train and you start developing further upon it without having to spend a lot of money, without having to be given you a T4 and get an H100. Right? So that's what you want. You want the H100, you don't want T4 because time to market is important. Right, Susan? Time to market is one of the key things as a startup.
Absolutely. I'm just laughing, Sabor, because one of my party tricks was memorizing the NVIDIA GPU catalog. So yes, that you get this is coming from my computer vision days, but you get the customer who wants essentially A40 or L40 capability on a T4 card. And you're like, these models are huge. And I love what you said, because the reality is not everyone, and this is, I don't mean to be like the Debbie Downer of this, not everyone is cut out to do an AI startup. There's, at some point, you're going to be over your skis if you don't understand certain things. And like you said, so when you look at, say, the big players, or you look at companies that are buying 100,000 H100s and have an order in for another 100,000 H100s, and you as a startup, at some point you could use a public cloud and you could try and train your models there. And then one day, this is a true story, Sabor. So I was having lunch with a friend of mine who's he teaches at MIT, and I was taking some stuff at MIT, and we were talking last fall. And in one of the startups he was mentoring, someone left an instance on in a public cloud, and this is a pre-revenue startup. They got a $67,000 bill.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that happens. And so, you have these well-meaning founders who've got great healthcare products. They're like, okay, yeah. And they're trusting maybe someone to do their DevOps who has no experience. And then suddenly that DevOps person isn't looking at the bank account. And then suddenly you're getting these bills for tens of thousands of dollars a month. The biggest bill I ever saw, and I won't disclose, but was a 6-figure bill for 1 month for a startup. And I want to just throw up. It was unbelievable.
I mean, we were able to actually stop our burn pretty much on month 3. Coming from a place where I know what servers cost. When we started up, we're going to develop our first managed services. It's going to be backup as a service. That's what we're going to do. All right. So we needed, a simple database, and we needed a simple front-end application node. And we're working on developing it, and the first month's bill was like $200, $300 in AWS. So I was like, all right, that's not bad. Cool, small instance, good to go. And then we unleashed the developers onto the environment, and next month it was $2,500. And I'm like, I have deployed the smallest database and the smallest application. And above all, what really, 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 really pissed me off was I couldn't understand the bill. And again, this is 7 years ago. Maybe the billing has gotten better, but still, I just couldn't understand the bill, right? It's like one of those basic things. I want to buy something. Please tell me what I'm buying, and here's some money, right? It's like that transaction. It makes sense. But I don't know how many of you kind of know what your transaction rates need to look like, because I sure don't. And I'm in this field. I've written database code. So database deployments, right? So the key here is for for startups and specifically people that are cash strapped, you have to make those decisions. Well, the third month, instead of getting another $2,500 bill, we bought a server for $3,000 that did all of that. And I was like, okay, here's a burn that stopped, right? So essentially, what the essence of everything that SDN has built, whether it's GPU as a service or private cloud as a service, HIPAA compliancy side of the house, or InfoSec, it is designed to be as a consumption model as a service. So that way, everybody has access equally across the board. Before, by the way, this is from OpenAI, before OpenAI kind of went closed. So everybody has access to be able to develop what they want to develop on infrastructure that is next generation. That is something that is exclusively available today to use OpenAI, right? So that is the essence of what we built, and HPE has been fundamental in trying to bring this to market for everybody. Now, the last space I want to finish off with is back on slide number 2 slides before. And I'll just touch base a little bit about it. In order to be able to enable startups to get everything going, HPE has come up with a credit system that maybe Derek can cover a little bit more. But essentially, we are trying to enable everybody to qualified folks to be able to get off the ground without having to worry about an AWS bill. And that is essentially where this comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the program in terms of SDN working with everybody individually to understand what those unique requirements are. It's not one size fits all. So that's a great thing, is that we're able to kind of come in and understand what the rate is, how we can help relative to that. So that's that key piece in terms of the technology enablement. And if I can jump back, I'm going to jump forward here now in terms of, in that conversation, we're talking about also kind of the access to resources. And a lot of folks may not have everything that they need relative to, the areas of expertise. And one of the things that the program provides is the opportunity to collaborate with HPE leaders and healthcare tech experts for guidance and mentorship. And what we do is we map the needs of the startups with the relevant resource at HPE. That might be from a strategy standpoint or a leadership standpoint, giving some visibility. This is just a couple of the leaders that in fact, Susan, I know you've engaged with several of these folks. But Monica Batchelder, who is the executive sponsor of our program, is our Chief Sustainability Officer. Aisha Washington is our Global VP of DEI. She's made herself available to Susan and others in the program. Melissa Margraves is our Healthcare and Life Sciences Sales Leader. So on that strategy layer, absolutely resources available to talk about what your startup strategy is and can make those connections. On the partnership side, we've got Fred Tan, who's our Global Head of Social Impact, and he runs our HPE Foundation. We're excited. We have Kristen Orton on our team, and she is not only in our office of CTO, but she's also an angel investor. So Kristen is wonderful. Scott is our NVIDIA Alliance Manager. So on the partnership side, the list goes on, right? The idea is to the right, there's more people. And so on the technology side, really, this is where, you need some guidance, some access to knowledgeable folks. Chris Platt is our Healthcare and Life Sciences Chief Technologist. Bhuvana is our AI Chief Technologist, and Addie's a solution architect in the AI space. And these are folks that can come in, depending on your need, and have conversations, with you, understand kind of what your needs are, and provide a degree of ongoing engagement and mentorship. So pretty exciting stuff.
And by the way, if I don't mind adding, same thing for our team as well. SDN has a plethora of engineers that are available to everybody at no cost at all to come up with the designs with Chris's of the world to kind of figure out how can we actually get you enabled and going.
Absolutely. It's great stuff. The other thing that we do in the community engagement and the Partnership for Success is really provide, visibility opportunities. So there are opportunities to participate in premier industry events like HIMSS coming up. We're going to be there. So I know Susan's going to be there. And if you're there, we'd love to meet with you. So, in fact, actually, we have a cocktail reception on Tuesday night. So let us know if you're there. But we also provide access to other HPE hosted or healthcare events and speaking engagements. From a networking collaboration standpoint, we're building out a dedicated LinkedIn group where we can connect with healthcare innovators. And I've even seen within the program just the connection and community creation amongst participants, right? I mean, Susan has had engagements with a number of the folks that were in the program that I didn't even think you knew. And we're like, hey, you really should meet this person. And then all of a sudden there's just this energy flowing. So I've just been super excited to see that partnership for success and leveraging, that ecosystem, right, to create new opportunities and things. And and the executive connections. Susan, you've had a lot of firsthand experience in this area, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about your experiences over the past year because we've definitely kept your dance card full. So
Absolutely. And I'm still back on the HIPAA compliant cloud. So I apologize. It's like you put Sabur and I together and it's like ADD on steroids. So I do want to just say, coming out of my background in computer vision, and as you begin to with your AI and with your data going through various levels of compliances, whether it's going to be SOC 2 or whether you're looking at GDPR or whatever it is, CCPA in California, depending on how you're deploying your models. I mean, the list goes on and on. One of the things that for us at the Pause is really important is the HIPAA compliant cloud. And to give line of sight, for every 100 subscribers we have 1 million data points. And that is almost per month. It's unbelievable. And coming out of Vision, Derek, Sabor, I had massive data payloads that were, just to use some lay terms for people who might not fully understand, that you have to look at storing the data and then identifying how you're going to use the data for building your models. You have some data that's not necessarily useful, but it might be useful down the road. You don't know. And that's where this partnership is really critical for our team, our advisors who look at this as an opportunity to scale and a safe, compliant place to store our data. So I just want to riff off on that. Shifting gears, the partnership piece is invaluable because no one is going to invest in your startup, and enterprises are not going to do business with you without exposure. And the landscape has changed. Even in Derek, in my podcast, Raw and Real Entrepreneurship, I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of founders. I've interviewed billionaires. I've interviewed 12-year-old founders, and I've interviewed founders who failed. There is a new type of founder that is emerging. And this founder is what I refer to almost as the celebrity founder. They have to have their LinkedIn presence. They have to be doing interesting things. They have to be getting exposure on stages. And that isn't easy because often the people on those stages are the people who've already achieved $100 million in ARR. They're not the early stage startups. And one of the things I've always said about HP, because I've had the privilege of working with HP in multiple ventures, is that HPE is the company that deeply cares. Last year, before we even stood up our product, HPE said to me, hey, would you, we want to put you on stage, and which is great, and I've done a lot of stage stuff, but we'd like you to host a roundtable on menopause. And I went, what? That is awesome. And we had these heads of HR and different women from massive companies, multi-billion-dollar global companies, who signed up to come and were coming. It was a mistake. They read it and they said, really? And HPE, to my knowledge, was the first company that actually did this. And the fact that the HP is so willing to bring the ecosystem together to have these conversations, because especially for women's health and for men's health too, I was raised by my late dad, Joe, a single dad and engineer. There are a lot of very sensitive issues in women's health and men's health. And the fact that HP is willing to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we're going to have a roundtable on this. We're going to discuss it. We're going to invite you, every single big brand name customer you can imagine. It's just been massive. And I always say, when HP asks me to do something, I absolutely do it because I love the company. And that's why I'm wearing green today. I've always said to Derek and the entire team, if you need me ever at the Edge booth for any of the big shows, I'll be down there selling servers. No problem, because you can wake me up in the middle of the night to do that. But I love this company. I feel very blessed. I feel very valued, and I feel very part of the company. And I don't think, oh, it's the pause and HPE. I think of the pause as an HPE company.
Awesome, Susan. That's great. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the pause and how you're leveraging AI in your day-to-day?
Yes, Mo, absolutely. So I'm gonna do a quick dive of some statistics for people so they really understand the problem statement. 51% of the world's population are women. By the year 2030, 1.1 billion women will be in menopause. In the United States, it's 50 million. In Canada, it's 10 million. Here's the problem. Care is not accessible. You see celebrities launching companies, God bless them, with membership subscriptions. You see companies that, people can access, providers. The reality is, what about accessible care, right? And even in Phoenix, where I live, there is one part of the city where 200,000 people don't even have access to a clinic. It's the fifth largest city in the United States. So we started with the premise and we're in this phase one of how can we build something that consumers could use. Download it from the App Store, download it from the Play Store, have your own personalized AI agent, and we're building agentic AI that is going to create precision recommendations for you, for lifestyle, for well-being, recipes, for what if I can't sleep at 2 a.m. Did you know that according to McKinsey, Mo, 41% of American women want to quit their jobs due to lack of support for menopause? Employers lose 3 days per woman per year for menopause. It is costing US women from their pockets 1.8 billion. Globally, it's 150 billion. It hasn't even been measured. This is coming from the Mayo Clinic. When you start to add in the adjacent healthcare costs for these women, it's $36 billion. So unlike other models where they're saying, yeah, we have AI, but there's a human in the loop, our AI is direct to consumer AI, accessible AI at a just ridiculously great price. And then we're scaling into benefits. And that's the other thing with STN, with HPE. When I went to Sabur and I went to Derek and I said, yes, we want to go into benefits because less than 4% of US corporations of the Fortune 500 offer a menopause benefit. So we're going after that 96%. And I will tell you, you can only match energy with people who can match energy with you. And I could text Sabora at 5 a.m. and be like, yes, queen, let's go get that. Let's take that market on. And Derek is like, yes, let's figure out how to bring this, to customers. That's the key, but that's what we're building. So the agentic AI, and in our phase 3, we will have several AI agents, and I won't disclose too much of that without an NDA, but that's what we're doing with AI, Mo. So we also integrate with wearables. That's where a tremendous amount of data comes from. And then mobile, there's a tremendous amount of data. We have more data than we can possibly digest. And I'll just finish around the data since I'm on my data pedestal at the moment. Did you know that women in menopause have actually not been studied? And 70% of women's healthcare data that for the recommendations for women comes from middle-aged white men. And this is not a DEI statement. So don't get me wrong. I just need everyone to hear this. Women do not volunteer for clinical studies. Men do. So when they're trying to build models and they're saying, well, we need to create a model for cardiovascular health. Cardiovascular disease kills more women than the top 5 cancers combined, that, they don't have the data. So we started with the premise premise. And when I first spoke to Chris Platt and to Melissa and Derek and Aisha and the whole team at HP, I said, we are going to build the data. We anonymize our data. Can you guys help us with storing the data, with helping us with our data so we can build these predictive models, we can build our agentic AI? And they were like, yes, 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 yes. In fact, I'll just say this. I haven't asked them for anything and they've said no yet. So I hope that day is not coming.
That's a good thing to have, right? Thanks, Susan. That's very exciting.